This is a demonstration of our AI-based intelligent data extraction and OCR technologies that you can use to automate and extend your Integrify workflows. The demonstration will also highlight the integration capabilities possible between Sharepoint and the Integrify platform, leading to a more efficient workflow. The use case for this demonstration is invoice processing and approval, a common use case for many of our current customers. But it's important to note that the concepts and features we will demonstrate today can be applied to any document-based workflow. So let's get started. You can see that we have our Integrify invoice processing dashboard, and at this point it's blank. But once we start processing these invoices, you're going to see these panels populate with data that's been extracted from the invoices, in addition to assigned task and other request status information. We also have our Integrify workflow. At first glance, it looks like a typical invoice approval workflow. The workflow starts with a form task. Typically, this would be where the requester would rekey in the information from the invoice into the form, attach the invoice, and then indicate where and to who this invoice should be routed. One of the most labor-intensive and error-prone steps of the workflow. But in our demonstration, we will see that this step is fully automated. Once this form task is submitted via the API, it can then route in 3 directions based on the data extracted from the PDF invoice. If the invoice is over $25, it will be routed for manager and additional approvals. If it is less than $25, it will be auto-approved, meaning no user interaction at all. And if there's bad or missing data, it will be routed to a billing team member for manual review. Now let's move on to our Sharepoint environment. Here we have an empty Sharepoint folder that we will use to upload and process the invoices. And I have 4 invoices on my drive to be processed. I'll open up one here and we can see that these are just a collection of standard invoices that an organization would receive from their vendors or service providers. So again, here are my invoices. And it's worth noting that one of the invoices is a screen capture in JPEG format. Our data capture technology is intelligent enough to read most standard file types, so you're not limited to just PDF documents. I'm now going to drag and drop my 4 invoices into our Sharepoint folder, and we can see that the processing will begin. As these are being processed, let's talk a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes. Dropping the invoices into the folder initiates a Power Automate script that is doing several things. First, it is calling the AI-based intelligent data capture to extract the data from the invoice files. It then reports out that data to Sharepoint so we can see that in our list view. Next, it is calling the Integrify API, and for each invoice, it is passing across the data and creating a new request. Here's a closer look at the actual extract flow script. This is how we can tell the system what data to extract from the uploaded files. You will notice that these are not hard-coded values. Since this is an AI-based component, we are using descriptions or prompts to specify the data we want to collect, similar to what you would use when interacting with ChatGPT. It appears our uploaded invoices have been processed, and we can see the data that's been extracted. If we look at this invoice on the bottom here, this PDF file, we can see that the invoice number, supplier name, payment due date, and amount was all extracted from this PDF document. Interesting to note too, we have this status column. This is not a status from the processing happening in Sharepoint. This is actually the status of the Integrify requests that were generated, and it's being reported back to the Sharepoint interface. We can see that based on the workflows that are executing in Integrify, some of these invoices have been auto-approved, some are pending manager approval, and some will require review. So just by nature of uploading these documents, we have already seen the power of the data extraction and OCR technology and the seamless integration between Sharepoint and the Integrify platform. Now let's take a look at what's going on in Integrify. You can see that our previously blank dashboard now contains request and task information for each of the invoices that we uploaded in Sharepoint. As we look at our summary report, we can see the status of the request, We can also see the data that was extracted from the invoices, which is now available for reporting, business rules, and notifications. Even the attachment itself is available via the report. Looking at the task list, we can see that 2 tasks have been assigned. Since we uploaded 4 invoices, you may expect to see 4 tasks listed here. But remember that based on our business rules, 2 of these tasks have been auto-completed and require no additional manual review. Let's open one of these auto-approved requests and see how it was routed in Integrify. So I'll select the request link for this request. And now we are looking at the request detail for this invoice. Even though this invoice approval was auto-completed, we can see that the extracted data was captured in the workflow, ensuring the audit trail. When we look at the flow view, we can see how this request traveled through the workflow. It starts here at the form task, and since the invoice was less than $25, it traveled down the auto-completed path. Then it changed the status of the request, reports it to Sharepoint, and completes. A huge efficiency gain if we compare that to a user manually keying in the data, completing review tasks, and manually updating the status in a different system. Let's review one of the other tasks assigned to us. Here we have one with the status of invoice review, which indicates to us that manual intervention is needed before this invoice can route for approval. I'll go ahead and open that now. And immediately we can see the data extracted from the PDF invoice. And we notice that the invoice number is missing. I can verify this by opening the associated attachment. And we can see that, in fact, the invoice number is missing. So likely at this point, I'd have to reach out to the vendor and get the correct invoice number. And once I have that, I could rekey in that information into the form and then resubmit it for approval. And you can see that once we do that, if I come back to my task list, the task is now changed from a status of invoice review to manager approval. And if I jump back to Sharepoint, we can see that the same thing has happened. Instead of the status being invoice review, it's changed to pending manager approval, reinforcing the two-way integration between Integrify and Sharepoint. Thanks, and that concludes this demonstration.